So you mentioned about two challenges for digital tech leaders. So the first is the board don't really understand what you do. I mean, it's quite typical. So engineering is always slow. Engineering is always doing some stuff that we don't understand. And secondly is that tech leaders, even though between themselves, they don't actually communicate well. So cross-functional team, different roles also have different perspectives and different perception. And in the book, you mentioned that most technology projects don't actually fail because of the code, but mostly because of people not playing nice with each other. Tell us more about this because I'm quite intrigued, although I know I've experienced it, but maybe there's a reason what you pick from this trend.
So tech projects failing, as you're saying, it's never down to bad code. It's always a people thing. A big part of it is that engineers and designers and so on, practitioners, think that just doing amazing work, really great work is enough. And it's not. Doing great work is half of the battle, literally only half. And the other half of the battle is having everyone around you think you're doing really great work. So everyone within the team that you're working in, getting them to buy into your work, thinking that what you're delivering is really great. And then perhaps more importantly, the stakeholders that you're interfacing with across the business, making sure that they think you're doing really good work. Because what's the point in doing amazing work if no one thinks that it's amazing? This isn't just in engineering. This is across, I would say, every profession. What most practitioners do is you're really into what you're doing, right? You're really passionate about it. You want to do a great job. You work really hard to try and make it as good as possible. And you forget that everyone else around you who doesn't do your job isn't that interested. And so when you go and present your work, you go into the minutiae, you talk about all of the detail and the ins and outs of it all, and people don't care. Actually, if you could grow your empathy skills, and empathy is half of emotional intelligence, if you can grow your empathy skills, you can start to understand what other people need, what their drivers are, and what motivates them, and what's going to make them be like, yeah, that sounds great. And then when you talk about your work, you communicate in a way that works for them, not just what you think makes you excited, because they're not going to share your excitement.
Yeah, I do agree with you. So most engineers and techies, right, we are all passionate about building our stuff, either writing the code, building good design, building great UIs and things like that. But eventually when you present your products, you think the stakeholders or the listeners are one of you or one of us. Actually, at the end of the day, they don't get what you do. So we cannot translate to the language that stakeholders understand. I think that's where the struggle is. And also you observe in the book that actually many of these kind of team issues, 70% you quoted, are due to lack of people skills. And then according to also a research from Stanford Harvard study, 85% of job success comes from well-developed people skills. So what kind of people skills that you are referring to and why are they so essential?
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to break it down to its most simple, it is just emotional intelligence, because the majority of people skills are derived from really good emotional intelligence. So people skills, things like your ability to resolve conflict. And conflict doesn't mean a massive argument. It just means when you and someone else have a difference in opinion. So conflict resolution, how to build really strong relationships with the people that you work with, how to build rapport, how to influence people so that they buy into the work that you're doing, how to facilitate meetings and workshops so that you get to a good outcome, how to tell stories to bring your work to life so that, again, stakeholders buy into it. And all of these are examples of people skills. If your emotional intelligence is down at 0, you're going to be useless at all of them. Whereas if your emotional intelligence is at a pretty high level, these people skills are going to come far more naturally to you. And with just a bit of guidance and kind of someone helping you with the know-how, you can actually get very good at these people skills and be far more successful in your job. Henry, you talk about the example from Stanford and Harvard. I just want to say it again because it's so important. 85% of job success is people skills. Tech leaders, we often hire people for their engineering capabilities and what they've done in the past, which is important. Don't get me wrong. This is not the most important thing. The most important thing is, are you able to interact well with people? Because 10 years ago and before, engineering was done in a very siloed way. In fact, all of product development was very siloed. Your BA wrote 200-page document of requirements, which no one really read. And then your BA would throw that to the designers. And the designers were like, well, I'm a creative. I can't read 200-page document. They would just create whatever they wanted. And then they'd throw their designs over the fence to the engineers who would be like, well, I can't build this, so I'll just make it however I can. and products just failed. And obviously, we now work in Agile, which is the far better way of working. But this means that the importance of working in a team, of being able to interface well with business stakeholders and your cross functional team is just amplified.
You mentioned a good point there where previously, traditionally, before the agile trend, people used to work in silos. It's like throw over the wall kind of work. It is being passed down like a waterfall from requirements to designers, developers, testers, and so on. People don't talk. And now I think with the agile trend, people are working more inside a cross-functional team where there are different roles together in the teams. I think also that's when the conflicts tend to arise because different roles tend to have different perspectives, right? So
Yeah.
you bucket all this as emotional intelligence. I think it's pretty large bucket. So you mentioned one is about empathy. Are there any other top, maybe 2, 3 skills that you think are like important in the emotional intelligence?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, emotional intelligence is about empathy, which is about your ability to understand where other people are coming from. But it's also the second part of emotional intelligence is understanding yourself, understanding the things that trigger you, because people are going to say and do things that frustrate, annoy, and upset you. That's just life. We all communicate in different ways. There are 4 core communication styles. Some people will have the same communication style and you'll enjoy interacting with them. And some people will have wildly different communication styles and you'll struggle potentially with them. Emotional intelligence, half of it is about understanding yourself. So it's the things that trigger you so you can control them. So you can understand, okay, I'm feeling annoyed here because that person did this. And they didn't mean to annoy me. That wasn't their intention. I'm being triggered here. And if you can learn to take control of those emotions, your relationship can potentially thrive with that other person. If you can't, your relationship will go on a downward spiral because you'll be annoyed at them. They'll pick up on your bad vibes and the relationship just goes downhill. So emotional intelligence, having empathy for other people, really understanding where they're coming from, why they're communicating the way they're communicating, and assuming the best of intentions in them because other people always have the best of intentions. You may not like the way they talk or the way they behave, but their intentions are almost always honorable. Their objective is not to annoy you, it's to get something done. So, number 1 with emotional intelligence, empathize with other people. Number 2, understand yourself, the things that trigger you, and also the impact you have on other people. So, the way that you talk, the way you communicate, the way you behave. It will have a negative impact on some people that like to communicate in a different way. So a classic example is engineers. Engineers have a communication style that is generally very much around the detail. And most engineers are very, very into the detail. And that's fantastic. As an engineer, we need you to be into the detail because you're working on some really complex products with hugely complex edge cases that need managing. We need you to be into the detail. However, many senior stakeholders, their communication style is more often around the big picture and the impact that's being had. So when you go in as an engineer and you start communicating around all the detail, you're going to rub other people up the wrong way because that's not how they like to communicate. So really get to know yourself, how you like to communicate and the impact that can have on other people. It's not always positive. And then the third thing, which I guess is like an extension of those, is to always define a win-win outcome in everything that you do. So in every interaction you have with everyone you work with, be it within your cross-functional team or be it with stakeholders you're interacting with, just finish 2 sentences. The first sentence is, at the end of this interaction, I want them to do, think, or feel something. So work out what you want out of that interaction. And then also you're going to finish the sentence, at the end of this interaction, they want to do, think, or feel something. And then once you've worked out what you both want, the outcome you want, then just take a stand for a win-win. And in everything you do, obviously you don't want to lose. You want to get the outcome that you want. But I would urge you to take an equal stand for getting the outcome you want and the outcome that the other person wants. And it is not acceptable for you to not get what you want. And it is not acceptable for the other person to get what they want. They are both equally important. And the moment you start getting that clear in your head and going into all your interactions being like, I want you to win. I want to win. But I also want you to win. And I'm going to take a stand for you winning as well as for me winning. You do that, and you're going to be so much more successful in your role.
So you mentioned about assuming best intent, right? So I think this is one key theme or key mindset to have when you deal with other people. Because I assume these days, everyone in the team, nobody wants to create chaos or create mistakes, right? So always they have a good intention, but maybe they lack some perspectives or some different mindset, and hence they do what they do. And I like the thing that when you explain about emotional intelligence, yeah, I mean, people know we should try to understand others, empathize with others, but sometimes we don't understand ourselves better. Like what you mentioned, what triggers us, what kind of emotions, maybe when you read some chats or hear the boss says something, you assume that they are blaming us or you assume that this person is angry. Well, actually, all this probably is just in your mind, right? It's just how they communicate that is different than you. So I really like the way you explain this, like know other people, know yourself. And the last one is about win-win outcome. So I think this is also pretty rare in a world where some people just want to be dominant and show they are more powerful than the others. Yeah, I really love the way you phrase it. So in the book, you mentioned about 6 key skills. So you have mentioned some of them, but maybe if you can summarize, what are the 6 key skills that you want to advocate for digital leaders and tech practitioners here?
Yeah. So 6 are conflict resolution, which is anytime you disagree with someone, how you get to that win-win outcome. And that for me is almost the foundational one, because without that, if you're not going to get win-wins, if you're going to end up losing or they end up losing, at least one of you is going to be annoyed. And that leads to deterioration in the relationship. So number 1, conflict resolution. Number 2, building up strong relationships with people, knowing how to be like a master of building up relationships with people, how to build rapport, understanding the 4 different communication styles so you can adapt how you communicate depending on the different person. So conflict resolution, strong relationships. Third one's around leading and influencing. We no longer live in a world where leadership is hierarchical. Everyone should be a leader. No matter where you sit in a hierarchy, you should be a leader to the people that report into you. You should be a leader to your peers, and you should be a leader to the people that are more senior than you. So kind of leading and influencing people is incredibly important, towards win-win outcomes, right? Not towards you winning and them losing, towards everyone winning. So conflict resolution, strong relationships, leading and influencing. And the last 3, facilitation, storytelling, outbound comm. So facilitation, obviously getting the group towards the outcome that you all want to get to. Again, a win-win outcome. I think I've said win-win about 3,000 times already, but it's kind of the core of all of this. If you just remember one thing, if you're listening, just remember win-win. The only 2 words you need to remember. So yeah, facilitation, making sure you get the group towards that win-win outcome. Storytelling, which is one of the most important influencing techniques. If you want to get people on your side, you've got to start getting good at storytelling. And finally, then outbound comms, which is about the way you present yourself or the way you write, because obviously a lot of comms is done through written chat now, through team chat, Teams and Slack. So making sure that you are communicating in a way that works for other people.
Thanks for mentioning all this. I repeat one more time: conflict resolution, strong relationships, leading and influencing, facilitation, storytelling, and outbound communications.